and welcome to Money Matters. My name is Jim Butler with Marcum Wealth. My co-host tonight is Steve Rosenberg of the GSD Group. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, Jim. Great to be here. Thanks.
Well, we, as usual, we have a great guest, and there's going to be a lot to talk about with him once we get there. Why don't we start out for the first few moments and talk about somewhat of a timely topic. We don't want to date ourselves too much, but 2023 is going to be with us for a while, of course. And the economic and business landscape is anything but smooth. On our end, we don't necessarily foresee quite as rough roads as we experienced in 22. But I've long given up trying to predict anything about the future and more or less anticipate that there will be changes and a degree of uncertainty. So just starting out based on the work that you do and the clients that you serve, what are you hearing from folks with regards to any outlook into 23 and maybe even beyond?
Well, Jim, if you could predict the future, we could just end the show right now and you and I would hit the lottery machines or anything else, and we would take Eugene with us. But so I spent a lot of time in the not-for-profit space, and a lot of these not-for-profits are still trolling for donors and contributed income, because earned revenue is, typically not more than 40 to 42% of their overall budget from a revenue perspective. So they all want donors. And every day there seems like another 501c3 or C4 that pops up. So donors are hesitant because their portfolios aren't what they were 3 and 4 years ago. Certainly, in the former robust years in the late 2010s. And so everybody's nervous. You spend your life in that world. And I wish I could tell you that I had a crystal ball, but I certainly don't. Nobody should ever come to me for tax advice ever. But, as I watch this landscape and I see the not-for-profits scrambling for donors, and I see donors either decreasing or certainly being a lot more hesitant with their decision-making and much more judicious, asking much better questions, looking for much better performance from the not-for-profits. Donors have become more sophisticated because they're much more cautious about their spending, even the ones that have donor advised funds. So I don't think that anybody knows the answer, Jim.
So has that changed significantly, Steve, from say 5 years ago?
Oh my God, yeah. That 5 years ago were like the Wild West. People were giving away money, the donor advised funds. There were so many of them, Fidelity and Vanguard and a lot of not-for-profits that had their own DAFs set up. There were so many new ones, family foundations, even people that were not what I would call sort of the ultra wealthy and the uber rich were setting up family foundations to give away money. Well, it could be small gifts of, $2,500 or $500 to the people that were giving away millions of dollars. But you'll still see those gifts, and you still see people's names on buildings and endowments to universities and hospitals and that sort of thing. But the gifts and the requests just take a lot longer, and people are just more hesitant, even the ultra rich, because they're like, well, I had an extra billion a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And while I'm still not going to worry about where my next meal is going to come from, I have to think about where I'm going to put this money. So I think the answer is an unequivocal yes as to people are thinking about their decision making.
Yeah. So it's interesting because part of what I hear you saying is people are concerned about how to put their money to work. We think about that individually. How are we investing our money, for example? Certainly many of our listeners think about that. And then how do institutions, whether it's donor advised funds or nonprofits, how do they, put their money to work in order to take advantage of this uncertain landscape that we're going to be faced with for a while. Right. And I think some of the things that really need to get cleared out or cleaned out in order to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not saying anything that isn't readily apparent, but I think the inflation factor is certainly near the top of the list, if not, enemy number one. And the Fed is fighting that. One could argue, are they doing a good job? Are they late? Are they where are we in the process? But the bottom line is, as you and I have discussed, there's a lot of uncertainty. And as a business person working in financial services for many years, the one thing I'm always amazed at is how politicians generally, at least at the federal level, tend to muddy up the waters and seem to have a completely different agenda than what normal people that you and I deal with on a regular basis are faced with.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Totally agree. It's going to be an interesting year for sure.
Yeah. So the political landscape, again, is not something that we really talk about. And this year is, an off year with regards to more local elections taking place. But that also means that we're getting ready for next year being a major election year at the federal level. And one of the things that has come out recently, and I'll just touch on a few talking points here, is the new budget, coming out from the current administration. Part of that budget includes surprise additional spending. That's one thing that politicians are very good at. I don't mean to necessarily, hit them upside the head with that, but the reality is, spending is just way too high. And part of the current narrative has to do with the tax situation. And if we look at some of the numbers that are right from IRS data going back as recent as 2020, the top, I'll just say 5% of income earners in the U.S. Actually pay close to 63% of all income taxes in the U.S. And the top 50% of income earners actually pay close to 98% of all income taxes. So the challenge that I think we as individuals are faced with is increasing taxes on the perceived higher income earners really part of the solution, or is that, more of a political narrative, and the circus goes on.
And it seems like there's more than 3 rings in this circus for sure.
So one thing that I'm going to jump to real quick is our question. So we have people that come in and ask questions of us periodically. And the question from Robert Fields, Gene, is how do sports activities help develop leadership skills?
So, Jim, I wrote about this extensively in my book. And to me, there are 2 great places that one can learn leadership skills: through sports and through the military. The military is probably by far and away number 1, but sports, young people start at a very young age, sometimes as early as 4 years old. And when I was growing up, you learned how to win, you learned how to lose, and learning how to lose is imperative. One of the things I talked about in my book is that failure is not the opposite of success. Not trying is the opposite of success. Failure is part of success, because if you don't learn how to lose, then you're never going to learn how to win. And we see so much of that today out in the world with people that have never lost, participation trophies, which I could rail on for the next 3 hours and we don't have time for, and things like that have not taught people how to succeed and how to lead. And sports, to me, the opiate of the masses, is the way that everybody should participate. You don't have to be Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan. You don't have to be the best. Participate, make new friends, have new experiences, and learn how to lose. Enjoy winning, but learn how to lose. We keep score for a reason. Some people win, some people lose. And when the Eagles lost this year in the Super Bowl, unfortunately, Jalen Hurts said, if you're not winning, you're learning. One of the best things I've ever heard anybody say.
Yeah. And somebody like him, he's people are looking to him for leadership and kind of hold him up to a higher standard. And I agree. I think that was very appropriate for him to say. So thanks for your insight and the expertise that you bring to the table. And if you have some questions that you would like our panel to consider, please write them in, and here's how you do that.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says Send Us Your Questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our hosts and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
Our guest today is Gene De Pasquale. He's a resident with the Keystone Center for Charter Change. Welcome, Eugene.
Appreciate your time.
Okay, welcome, Eugene.
Good to be here. Oh, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, okay, good. Just want to make sure.
So we have a good introduction for you. Can you give us maybe a 1-minute introduction to what the Keystone Charter is?
So first of all, I'm the former Auditor General of Pennsylvania. My job was to make sure your tax dollars were spent as effectively and as efficiently as possible. And after I left office, one of the issues I worked on as Auditor General was charter school reform. And the Keystone Center for Charter Change is about trying to reform our charter school law to make sure our public school system works across the board better, whether it be traditional public schools, your cyber schools, and your brick and mortar charter schools. And my job is to try to help drive some policy changes with my background as being the former Auditor General.
So the Keystone Charter has many different people involved.
Right.
How broad is your organization?
We have people that used to run charter schools, traditional public school superintendents, public policy officials. So it really runs the gambit of the public education system.
And are you a nonprofit organization that is funded in what manner?
So it's funded under what is known as the Pennsylvania School Board Association. So the Keystone Center for Charter Change is, in a sense, a subsidiary of the Pennsylvania School Board Association.
Okay. All right.
And it is a non-for-profit.
Yep. And then, so how do you, kind of compare the progress that you have seen since your involvement as Auditor General to where we are today in the Commonwealth with regards to charters versus traditional public school education?
So let's start on the academic side of it. Look, there's challenges everywhere. And we know that in a lot of areas, it really depends on your zip code and your funding level. More well-to-do suburban areas in traditional public schools tend to outperform inner city and more rural poverty-stricken schools. That's probably a national issue, but it's certainly a Pennsylvania issue. Under that, we've seen in our urban areas, brick and mortar charter schools in some areas doing well, as in some areas of our traditional public school system doing well, with some struggles as well. But where we've seen some significant lagging in academic indicators are in your cyber schools. Now, some do well, but we've seen much more consistent academic stalling of progress on your cyber system. So that's one area. Now, on the financial side of it, look, the suburban school districts clearly outspend your brick and mortar charter, your cyber schools, and your traditional public schools in your urban areas. Where we see, in my sense, as a former Auditor General, some of the most glaring problems is on two areas. One is on your special education funding, where we've seen in some kids that go into the charter school, we've seen what can only look to be a significant over indexing of them needing special needs help. Now, if they do need the help, I'm someone that supports them getting it. But we've seen some instances where about 1 in 10 kids that are identified as special needs in your traditional public school, then when they go into the charter school, it gets to be 10 out of 10. And that goes from spending about $14,000 or $15,000 per child to about $35,000 per child. So we have to figure out for all those kids if that spending is truly necessary. That's number one. Number two is particularly in the cyber school, we see, depending on where you go, not what school you're in, but depending on where you're from, the spending is dictated. So they could all be going to the same charter school, but if one student is from McCain County and the other is from Lower Merion Township, the spending by the state for the kid from the Lower Merion School District could be $35,000, while the kid from McCain County is only maybe $7,000 at the same school in the same classroom. That makes no sense, and that's clearly an area that has to be reformed.
So, Eugene, when you talk about the difference between the cyber and the brick and mortar, first of all, I don't even know that a lot of our viewers even know that we have, I think there are 14 cyber charter schools in the Commonwealth. But I also recently read a report that the cyber charters have about $100 million in surplus funds.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't those funds be used to fix that gap between those lower income students and those upper income students that you just referred to?
It's a great question. One of my biggest frustrations when I was the Auditor General was the state's right to know law. I mean, I think it's generally good, and it's dramatically better than it was certainly 70s, 80s, and 90s. But the management companies of many of these cyber charter schools are exempt from the state's open record law. So if I were auditing a traditional public school, I can see the salary of the superintendent, the business manager, look at all the contracts, et cetera. And for most of your brick and mortar charters, I was able to see the same thing. However, when you got to the cyber school, most of them had set up private management companies that were then exempt from the state's open record law. So we couldn't see what the CEO made. We couldn't see how their contracts were running. Couldn't see whether they were following proper bidding processes. And also for that 100 million surplus. Now that's not all for one school. That's spread out across the 14. I don't get to go under the hood and find out what that is. So for example, when I was auditing the Pittsburgh School District, they had at that time the largest fund balance in the state. They were set to have a tax increase. I found that they had the largest fund balance in the state. I called that out in the audit, and it stopped a tax increase from happening. That was because I was able to get into the weeds of that school district during the audit. However, when I came to auditing some of your cyber schools, I'm not able to look at that at the cyber school level because it's exempt from the state's open record law. That needs to be reformed.
So, Eugene, would a cyber charter CEO or principal have a reason why that's not available to you? I'm curious. Yeah. I have no idea, so I don't.
Yeah. I mean, the reason they would give you is, I will say this, it's a bunch of nonsense, but they'll tell you that they're running that the management company running the school is a private management company. That may be, but you're doing it with tax dollars. They have set it up in a sense. I want to be clear. They're setting it up what is legally allowed and exempting it from public review. But it's no different than the brick and mortar charter school principal or the superintendent of the traditional public school, in my estimation. I want to be clear. They're not breaking the law, and that's the problem.
And do the cyber charter schools get set up the same way as the brick and mortar with a not-for-profit or I was involved with the Constitution High School getting set up years ago. So they just need some sort of sponsoring organization to be a cyber charter also? Same rules?
There is a huge difference at the brick and mortar charter level. There has to be, and it's never perfect. And I want to be clear. There's no such thing as perfect. There's flaws everywhere. And, I don't want to make, have this be the enemy of the good, perfect be the enemy of good. But at the district level, a brick and mortar charter school has to have their charter approved by the local school district. Okay. And there's also a charter review board, but the system is not perfect, but it works relatively well. And every 5 years, that school district has to, in a sense, ratify the continuation of that charter school. And sometimes it gets denied, but usually it gets approved. So you have the school district and the charter school have a relationship. It can be rocky at times, but there's a relationship. At the cyber charter level, that gets approved by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And I have yet to be convinced, whether it be a Republican or Democratic administration in the governor's office, that they do nearly the type of review that I believe is necessary to make sure that we're getting the best bang for a buck as taxpayers, and for the families, to be blunt, and for the children as well, because we see a lot of these children fall behind. So if you're in a traditional school, traditional public school, or the brick and mortar charter, leave to go to the cyber. When they come back, it is almost 100% that those kids are then behind academically, and the brick and mortar charter or the traditional public school has to work overtime to get them up to grade level again.
Eugene, is there much pushback at the public school level for even approving an existing, meaning renew or create a new brick and mortar charter, because in their minds that might take away tax dollars from them?
There is, I don't want to make this seem like it's all daisies and roses at the brick and mortar level. There is a lot of times some conflict between the traditional public school and the brick and mortar charter school. But for the most part, that gets worked out through negotiation. The problem is that these local school districts don't have any say in the cyber system, even though they have to send their tax dollars over to the cyber chart as one of their kids goes to the school. So at the brick and mortar level, again, the school district and the local taxpayers through the school board have some say, where at the cyber level, they don't. That's a big problem. But I want to continue to hammer away with this. These private management companies running these cyber schools, to me, is a complete dereliction. I mean, even the legislature, when I was elected to the legislature, I served 3 terms, we were exempt from the state right to know law. When I was elected in a bipartisan way, we chose to make the legislature part of the state right to know law. I thought that was the definition of a no-brainer. Still, these management companies of the cyber schools are exempt. That's a problem.
Have there been any reforms brought to the legislature, and have any come close to passing?
Yeah. It's I want to say there's always been this little bit of a dance between the House and the Senate, where one session the House will pass a reform and the Senate won't act, and vice versa, which clearly shows they're getting heat from local voters, local taxpayers. That's a good thing. Now we just need to get something over hump, because a lot of these reform bills, I think, again, you're going to have people that want it to go even further. I get that. But a lot of these reforms will help fix a lot of the wrongs in the system, but they've gotten through one chamber but not the other. Perhaps because you now have a Democratic House, Republican Senate, Democratic governor. Maybe we're right for a grand compromise here.
So what do you see as the future of charters, whether it's brick and mortar or cyber, relative to the new administration within the Commonwealth of PA? And Steve, you probably have a little experience with that.
Yeah, for starters, I think choice is here to stay. I think choice is one to debate. I think now let's take that choice system and let's make it better. Let's reform the state's right to know law. And I want to talk about these special need kids. The charters may be right. It's in theory possible that there's an under-identification at the traditional public school level. It's also possible that there's an over-identification at the charter school level. We need to get at the truth here to figure out which side of this is right, because if the kids need the help, as a taxpayer, I want them to get that help, even if it costs me a little more. But if that money is if the kids don't need the help and it's simply a management company pocketing the difference, we need to weed that out of the system.
But how do you feel about, so the governor just passed proposed a new bill, and in that bill, he eliminated Governor Wolf's Level Up initiative, which, as you know, gave funding to the 100 poorest school district, which spent the least amount of money on per pupil students, including the Philadelphia School District. And it seems to me, you know this far better than we do, Eugene, but these charter schools seem to pop up in the lower spending areas. So if you're going to it seems like he's spending more on public education or on youth education, but doing away with this Level Up program seems to me that it would hurt those students that you've been talking about this program.
Number one, I think that is a very real concern, but I also want to talk about another area that I worked on as Auditor General that former Governor Wolf and myself worked on, and that was the School Safety Task Force. I've been a state rep, I've been the Auditor General. I've talked to a lot of the parents that make the jump from, and this happens particularly from a traditional public school in the city to a brick and mortar charter. This is where this issue particularly crops up. And that is the number one concern of parents that make that jump is school safety. We've got to find a way to make these schools safe. Parents don't want their kids bullied. It's unacceptable behavior. And so that's a lot of times why the jump happens. And so we've got to find ways to make sure our schools are safer environments for kids across the board. Now, on the funding issue, we know that the Pennsylvania court system has said the current funding of how we fund the funding levels of schools across Pennsylvania is unconstitutional. This is probably going to take several legislative terms to fix this, but there's no question that parents in poorer urban districts are concerned that their kids are not getting the same quality education that you get in a lot of your more well-to-do suburbs.
I feel like that's been a issue for a long time, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right. We're gonna have to find a way to. We've got some people doing the wards work, and a lot of these teachers doing some of the wards work in these districts. But we're gonna have to find a way to attract more talent into these poor urban districts. We're probably gonna have to pay some of these teachers more, and we're gonna have to make these schools safer if we want those districts to try to be remotely competitive with your suburban counterparts.
Eugene, do you think there are other states that have done a better job of being able to address these issues? Or could the Commonwealth be the model for some other states?
I found that it was us in Ohio, I thought had the worst charter school. I think almost every other state that has charter schools, I think, maybe you look at Florida, New York is really a model for anything. I think they do a better job. New York and Florida, you got one blue state, one, I guess, purple or red state. So try to depoliticize this, that I think do a better job on this charter school stuff than we do. Ohio and us, I have found that it is a competition we don't want to win, but Ohio and us tend to have at the worst end of the spectrum on the charter school side of it. Again, I want to be clear, not every charter school, I'm talking about the law, not the charter schools.
yeah, that's not a competition we want to win at all.
No, that's right.
Are they allowed, and when they get this funding, is there a certain percentage that they have to spend on security, or is that just how they get this funding and then they build their budgets their own way?
Oh, that they get the money and they build their budgets their own way, and that's always been. Look, when the governor and I started the school safety task force, we put forth a whole host of recommendations. I'll make clear the number one thing I met with kids in red America. When I talk about Pennsylvania now, red Pennsylvania, blue Pennsylvania, purple, I was all over the state with this. I met from kids that were from hunter families that didn't have a problem with, semi-automatic and assault weapons, to, kids in urban districts that wanted every gun melted away, and the combination. Every kid I talked to, said they needed more mental health resources in their schools. That was before COVID. And that they're concerned that a lot of these mental health challenges are, the social media drive from this. There's a whole and they want more mental health resources in these schools. And I think that was before COVID. COVID only exacerbated that problem.
Amazing. Yeah, that's amazing.
And by the way, I want to go back to an issue we were talking about earlier, or that before I was on air, and that is on the sports side of it. We've got to give kids more athletic opportunities. Look, I played baseball and football in high school and college. Look, those sports aren't for everybody. Particularly, if you don't want to be on a football field, the last place you should be is a football field. But I think we got to get more kids doing more physical activity. I think, and win, lose, or draw, you learn life lessons. But we got to get kids doing more activity.
Well, hey, we have to end it there. Unfortunately, our show has to go on to the next one, but really great topic. Thank you very much, Eugene and Steve. Great conversation. We could probably segue into another 30 minutes, but hope you enjoyed it, and certainly feel free to jump into the conversation. Our guest next week is Mike Verrill of the Sharp Financial Group. And again, thank you for listening.